Hello there, you amazing people, and welcome to the Amazing Action Comics podcast, where we are all about independent comics. I'm one of your hosts, Angel, with John Pepe.
How's it going, Angel?
No, I feel good because I got it right this
You
week.
got it right.
You go by so many names.
I'm
It's so good. How you doing this week?
good, man. I'm good. Read some good comics. Really excited to talk about one of them with you because a lot of that I felt was in your wheelhouse of when you got into comics and the stuff that kind of pulled you in, right? So looking forward to that. Uh, got a little bit of bad news yesterday, so I'm just gonna start with that off the top.
Ugh. Wait. Before you go into it, because
Okay.
you're going to go bad news, I'm going to go with something that I saw that was quite morbid.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and it was a post, and it was like it was the cast of Three's Company. So it had John Ritter, had Suzanne Summers, it had the Furleys or the Farleys or whatever you want to call them, and then Janet. I said everybody's real name except for Janet, and it had them all faded out
Yep.
except for Janet, which is the only one left alive in that entire cast.
I saw that. I saw the same thing, but they lumped it with a bunch of other shows too, which was shocking. So it had that one. It led with that one, of which,
Uh-huh.
yeah, Joyce DeWitt is the only one
Yep.
still alive. It had uh, uh, Mork and Mindy.
Okay.
With the full like the towards the end with Jonathan Winters as their like
Yep. Yep.
weird son, right? Only Pam Dauber is alive.
Jesus.
Laverne and Shirley.
Both.
Only Lenny, Michael McKean, is alive.
Wow.
And the other one I can remember off the top of my head is Gilligan's Island. And only Ginger is alive, Tina Louise.
And those are huge. Those are big cats. I mean,
Big
it is
cast.
Gilligan's Island. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Good. And the only reason why I was truly more, I mean, it just reminded me that we're just getting, we're getting old. We're getting up into
Yes.
the grade. I mean, we'll always. It's funny because I was talking to it. I was talking to somebody about this, but I was also listening to it. And that's what brought up the conversation. Is that the difference between men and women, honestly, is that men never grow the fuck up. They're kids for the rest of their lives. So if you get into like D&D, or if you get into comics, or you get into anything sort of like in that childhood range, it just, I don't know, something that's just something will always be there that kind of just drags you back into it and keeps
Yeah.
you as a child. Which is not the same for, and I'm speaking generally, of course, for most women. Because my wife, I'll tell you that right now, hates hates that I fucking read comics with a passion. But she'll go and watch the movies with me, which is
Sure.
insane. So
Yeah.
there's some give and take there, and I can see the appeal for like noobs, if you want to, or people that didn't read comics or the original source material for going to the movies. But yeah, it's so funny. Like if I show her where it came from, no interest at all
Right.
whatsoever.
Right.
But yeah, it was quite morbid just realizing that yes, we are not immortal yet.
Right. Well, I always like to say immortal until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it is. It's interesting. As far as like, yes, when it comes to consuming content, yes, I think a lot of men go to that nostalgia place, right? There's no doubt about that. We love the old shows, the old adventure stuff, the
Mhm,
escapist
mhm.
fantasy, totally. I did read something interesting this morning though, as far as just growth in general. Um, Really quick, it was sort of like if you've ever looked at back at anything you did when you were younger,
Mm.
and was like, you had that, what do they call it, cringe, right? Like you're like, I wish I didn't do it that way, or I wish I didn't do that, or whatever. Then you are exhibiting growth, right?
Mm.
So I don't know, like, gosh, 30 seconds ago, I'm looking back at what I just said and I'm like, oh, so I'm constantly exhibiting growth, right? Like I feel in that respect, I'm always looking back at stuff I do and I'm always feeling a twin tinge of regret, which is kind of an interesting segue into what I was going to, the bit of news that I had. As you know, I used to work at a shop up in Burlington, Vermont, Earth Prime
Mhm,
Comics.
mhm.
Christine Farrell, the owner of the shop, also basically has probably undisputed one of the most complete collections of DC Comics. Every single title, every issue they've ever published, she strived to get. And I believe that she did complete that up until she fell into a long illness. And I did find out yesterday, unfortunately, that she passed away uh,
Wow.
in early April. So my condolences to her family. My condolences to the Earth Prime Comics community, of which the store opened originally in 1983. So that
Wow.
that is a legacy, right? And Christine was a very special lady. She when you got to know her, she really just had a big heart and was always very generous and forgiving, and just a kid at heart. And I feel like a big regret I have is not keeping in touch with her. Also, I was very young at the time and given a lot of responsibility that I don't think I was quite ready for. So
How long were you there for?
I was there for about 5 years, 4 to
Wow.
5 years. Yeah.
Big time.
And I wish that I did not make the move that I had made at the time, and was able to continue on there. The store really, it was a very special place, and aesthetically became even more special with I believe current management, which has been around for quite a while now. But yeah, just again, that was a kind of a crushing blow to find, and a reminder of mortality, and in some cases a regret. But like I said, like, this is just my opportunity to just say, like, I love Christine Farrell. She was a fantastic woman. In some ways, she was my Burlington mom. She took care of me, and I learned a lot and grew a lot. Unfortunately, she did not get to see that, but God bless her. And the local comic shop community, and the collecting community has suffered a big loss.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's just it's just part of nature, isn't it? Just keep losing, there's loss, but just be able to reflect on sort of like the empire that they build, the legacy that they kind of leave behind.
Yeah.
Is the store still going to stay open?
Store is still currently open. I in a little bit of like sort of my diving into sort of what people have been saying about her and the store in light of this news. I got the sense that the store might have been bought out by a manager a couple years ago. Again, apparently she hadn't been in good health recently, but I believe the store is operating independent of her at this point. I don't know 100%. But really, one quick anecdote. Some of these testimonials I've been reading have been fantastic, and there was one person that kind of had this great thing where he's like, it would not be uncommon for you to be, being shown her collection or being in her house, which she would just casually throw an Action Comics #1 at you. And I'm like, that's a flex, right? I mean, that is just probably the greatest.
Facsimile?
An actual Action Comics #1. Hey, check this out. Like the ultimate comic collector flex. There was I think it was there was a guy who did a series of covers, right? He took pictures of actual comic covers, tried to get a whole complete run of them, published them, photo history of DC, Marvel Comics. I forget the guy's name right now, but apparently when he was compiling this, the DC archives did not have good enough copies for him to photograph on certain books, and so he reached out to Christine Farrell because the copies she had were better than the ones that DC had in their vault. So that's like the best flex in the world if you're in the collecting community.
Wait, so what happens to that collection?
I have no idea.
That's gold mine. If I was her, I would have just buried it all with me.
Yeah.
Through you guys going to my library in heaven. Wow, that's crazy.
It is, yeah. So yeah, who knows?
So you got to take a trip up there now.
There is a memorial beginning of June. I don't know if I could swing it, but if I can, I will. And it has been a while since I've been up
later
there.
on in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I love that town. It's changed a little bit in recent years. It's not as nice, I guess, as it was, but it is. I have a lot of friends and folks up there, so I definitely want to go up at some point soon. Absolutely.
So this is time where?
Earth Prime Comics in Burlington, Vermont, on Church Street. Yeah, definitely right across from City Hall. If check it out if you're ever up there. It's a really cool place.
Looking for Action #1, you know where to go.
Well, I would say, like, keep an eye out, I guess, for Heritage Auctions auctioning off the Christine Farrell collection. I'm sure that's just me spitballing, but I'm sure that's going to be on the horizon in some respect.
Might be.
Because that's going to be a big deal. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was even Previews World had a nice write-up obituary about her.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in like their little like retailer chatter or whatever.
Right, right.
Or collector chatter. Yeah.
Sad, but good to have her as long as we did.
Yeah. Well, she, like I said, she kept comics going in Burlington, Vermont. She was really the only game in town for much of those 41 years. And she encouraged a lot of kids to get in on the fun of collecting and getting into comics and stories and being a fan. And part of being a fan, sure, is complaining, but also loving what you're into.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's all we do most of the time is complain, especially non-creators. I love them.
Not here, but you know what people are going to be complaining about? How we went from morbid to depressing. This is like the best episode
but
ever.
we're gonna go back even further.
Stick around.
We're going back in time. But before we get there, all right, so we got sort of like the sad news out of the way. So we're gonna move into what this podcast was originally made for, which is really just reading independent comics and giving our 2 cents on it. So in episode 133, we do have a couple of comics for you. So we're gonna jump into the comic review. I believe we have 2 for you this week. So we're gonna start with John's first comic, which I did not read, which is
The Butcher's Boy from Dark Horse Comics. And this is like, now most of Dark Horse's output is on like, the self cover, like that sort of like, not glossy paper, and the cover's sort of the same stock. They went all out on this one, at least for the first issue. It's got some nice glossy paper and a nice glossy cardstock cover.
That's how you got
Story by Landry Q. Walker and Pennell Vaughn. Script by Landry Q. Walker. Art, Justin Greenwood. Brad Simpson on colors. Pat Brosseau on letters. Edited by Brett Israel, and assistant editor is Tara McCarran, with a designer credit to Gilbert Lascano and a digital art technician, Joey Weaver. So first of all, nice, feels nice, shiny. This book is creepy, dude. This book is wild. This has shades of Cabin in the Woods, House of a Thousand Corpses. Basically, anytime a group of young people get together to go on a nice, fun vacation for a weekend, and not only do their personal dynamics get away from the enjoyment, but then the bloodshed happens. So I don't necessarily want to give away too much. That was pretty much it in a nutshell. But basically, the narrative technique is really cool because you start on the opening pages. Basically, you get introduced to each of these characters, but you get introduced to them with sort of like a panel on top. It says like Thursday, right? And then the full page below, which is a bunch of panels, it says Saturday. And you see how it goes from, hey, we're going on a trip, to this is like deep into the trip. See how red and drippy everything is, with knives and stuff. So that's kind of a cool little narrative technique. It's a great way to open it up. You really kind of get a brief summary of who they are, why they are gathering together, and what the intention is for the weekend. And basically they're dragged to this, because most of them just want to go to a lake and have a good time and relax. But this one guy in their group has a new girlfriend, and she's all into go to spooky places and getting the likes on the internets and taking the selfies at the haunted locations. So she's like, we're going to this town that's that has this creepy old story about this cannibalistic butcher. This is old mining town, and basically it's supposed to be haunted, and we're going to go there. And of course they go, and there's no internet, so she gets upset because she can't live stream. Everyone else is upset because they're there. There's like almost nobody in the town, and everybody that is in the town is just off. And then of course they go to a diner, right? Because they're hungry. They actually find a diner in this town, and again, everybody in that diner just a little bit off. And narratively, they take great concentration in showing you them eating the burgers and hot dogs that are served at this creepy diner, right? Yep. And then there's another dynamic between two of them where they were kind of, he thought they were dating. She said that they weren't. he's like, you could have told me, and you were dating somebody else. And she's like, you don't deserve to know. And this all happens in the diner at the table. And then, then he gets up to leave. And they're like, no, you're the guy that drove. You can't just abandon us here. And he's like, I wasn't going to abandon you. Let's get out of here. And then the car is dead, right? The car won't start. And that's sort of where you kind of leave this situation. And in the next issue synopsis, there is something about how they are now feeling the effects of the tainted meat that they ate. And you put that in combination with the cannibalistic butcher backdrop of this, and the whole thing about how for the last 100 years, the butcher has been in this mine eating his son. And at night you can hear the screams of the son, with just like a great, dirty, grungy color palette. With, again, when the gore hits, the red is really deep and penetrating. So this is like a really cool first issue for horror fans. Again, if you like that familiar setup, and then just like seeing characters self-destruct before they have to fight for their own survival and get picked off one by one, to the point of even, it's even on the back cover, girl carries her own head and speaking in tongues. Like, great stuff, man. Great stuff. The Butcher's Boy from Dark Horse.
So horror.
Yeah, straight up.
Right, there you go, horror fans. So you got yourself a book to read this week. Butcher's Boy from Dark Horse Comics. Check it out.
Now, I will say this: Dark Horse. I've kind of noticed there's been a little bit of an inconsistency. There's some books that are not coming out on any sort of like scheduled basis. There's some books that seem to kind of drop off. So I really hope that this, whatever's going on at Dark Horse, I hope it gets corrected. I hope that this doesn't fall under that, because there's been some really good output coming from Dark Horse, but I feel like it's just sort of, and again, that's always a momentum killer in my book.
Right.
Just few and far between of things, and people sort of tend to move on and forget because we have short attention spans now.
Yeah. And we noticed a lot of that happening with the smaller publishers as well. We'll get either a bi-monthly or something won't come out for like 6 months. Like, but even with Image, I mean, I don't know if it was a planned hiatus, but Saga went like 6 or something issues and is back on hiatus again.
Yeah, that's sort of been a thing now with Saga for a few years, and I kind of get that. Like, it's like you're basically building up a trade's worth of single issues, putting them out, giving them time to work and stretch. I know like Sacrificers went on a little bit of a hiatus. Something Epic went on a little bit, but I think that's fine because it's sort of a planned thing. And you're getting that information because their Image is really good about having that back matter and the letter column and things like that. Now they're bringing stuff like that back. And so if you were reading that stuff, you would know that these books are going on a break. A lot of times they give the artists looks, God, I'm blanking on his name, but something Epic guy, right? He Simon Kudransky, right? He's doing a bunch of stuff right now, so he needs some time to do this stuff. With Dark Horse, I feel you get very little communication from editorial, and so ads will pop up and say, "Check out this new monthly," and then it's like months will go by, and the second issue.
Right. No, that's a little bit different. I mean, if you're gonna cut out, in the middle of a run, say issue 2 or 3, and not get anything for a couple months, it's a little bit different. And we've seen that, I think, with American Mythology's done that. Mad Cave has done it. Yep. I know the Nottingham was out for a little bit. I don't know if that was the end one as well. So like you said, I mean, but there's so much content out now. But it definitely fall off the wagon. And the same thing. It's funny because it transfers over to sort of like television as well, where Netflix is infamous for rolling out a season of something, and then not knowing if they're going to renew it until the numbers come in almost at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And then, we're going to renew it. And it takes like 2 years for the next part to come out. And even though I might have enjoyed the first run of the series, it's been 2 years. I'm not going to go back and rewatch it and figure out where it was at.
Right.
It sucks. Doing film. Yeah. All right. Check it out, guys. Butcher Boys from Dark Horse Comics. All right. So I'm going to let you start the second one because I want to get your take.
All right.
Because I wasn't, to be honest, I was kind of skeptical because there's been attempts, and I think only one right now that I'm really enjoying about sort of like this resurgence, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, take us there.
Okay, so this is from Image Comics, and it is called Blood Squad 7. And after 30 years, the brand is back. And this is written by Joe Casey, uh, illustrated by Paul Fry, colored by Francesco Segala, with some assists by Gloria Martinelli, lettered by Russ Wooten. And you do not have an editor credit, so we're just going to move on here. This is actually real. I found this to be really cool and really interesting. Again, we've seen, as you said, we've seen this before, but I think it's best explained by Joe Casey in the text in the back. That basically, this goes back to the beginning of Image Comics in 1992, and the idea of having creator-owned projects with a shared universe. And as Joe Casey illustrates in there, at some point, things don't always work out, right? And creators move on and take their toys with them. The most famous, obviously, being Jim Lee, taking all of his Wildstorm characters and bringing them over to DC. And then, of course, Rob Liefeld with Youngblood, which was the flagship title of the Image universe. And he makes a great comparison of people enjoying the first 30 years of Marvel Comics and piecing together this history, because now it's kind of hard, because with these gaps, with these properties moving on, these toys being taken out of the toy box, there's gaps now in this history. So this is an attempt to fill that gap with the return of a covert government action team, right? That is a next generation from the early 90s. And so we begin in the Ukraine, and we begin with, what's going on over there. And you have members of this team come in and sort of, they're supposed to be quiet about it, but it doesn't look like they're being too quiet about it, but sort of clean up a mess, right? And then you also, at the same time, you see what's going on at the White House, the discussions about what is happening, how this is put together by a veteran member of the original team. Then there's another dynamic with the next generation, and then you sort of get inside the workings of this covert team of superpowered individuals. And then you see the rest of the team sort of being built. It's a mix of old and new. And then you get a really interesting twist at the end where your I guess back then your breakout wild man character exhibits behavior which makes me think, well, we're also going to go into some the boys territory with this book too. We're really going to see a dark, gritty, grimy underside of these heroes, right? So I thought that was really neat. I thought there were some really cool references. Look, being a DC fan, ever before the crisis and after the crisis, and in the mid 80s and late 80s, early 90s of retcon over retcon and swapping out characters for other characters to fill holes that were removed from whatever. And this kind of I kind of was I guess I'm prepared for that, how they did this. So like when you see where they're having that meeting about how to market this team and how they want to do it differently from 30 years ago, and they show the poster of the team, which is the cover of that first Image comic, but the team is different, but it's you squint and you see what's going on, to even the commercial from 30 years ago of the action figures that were made and marketed for the team, and they even went ahead and used Todd Toys, right? Which was the original name of what became McFarlane Toys. So I kind of love that sort of meta fourth wall-ish breaking stuff and acknowledging the past, but kind of forging ahead with something new. And again, like he says, just trying to, as a comic nerd and wanting a nice cohesive continuity, trying to just kind of spackle over that little bit of a blotch there at the beginning. And who knows if this will bring back a unified Image continuity, because once a lot of those pieces went away, the guys that remained kind of just went off into their own corners and started just kind of moved away from that unified universe concept. So with things like Local Man, which is straight up analogs, and, but sort of I don't know. And then now this, I don't know. I think this might be something they're looking to try to do going forward. And if this is what makes it hit, cool. Because I dug this. This is a really
Yeah,
cool first issue.
yeah. I agree. I mean, this hits something, especially now for the guys that were getting into comics in the '90s or had already been into comics. These guys are in their 40s and 50s, some even in their early 60s. And when we talk about nostalgia, we talk about going back to those places that that brought us back to when we first opened up that book or went into the shop on Wednesday, saw something new. And for so long, we just had pretty much two rival companies that were shooting out stuff to choose from. And every now and then you would have some stuff here and there because this is where Turtles hit and all that stuff, independent stuff. But the big shakeup in the industry was in '92 when this stuff came out, when Image was formed prior to that and releasing their first book, Youngblood, which was double-sided, which is what Tony Fleece and Tim Seeley are doing with their Local Man.
The
You
flip
got
book.
more modern story on one side, and then flip it over, and you've got that sort of like that '90s, nostalgic feel, and it's reminiscent of his past. Crossjack was the hero in that book, and but currently, like in modern times, he's not a hero. He's actually prohibited from doing any kind of hero work. But there's this great, story of modern storytelling and then reflections of the past of what he used to be. But it's drawn in that '90s styles too. And it got to the point where it did become extreme, where it was just nothing but bulgy muscles. It didn't start off that way, honestly.
Right.
I mean, most of the characters were huge, but not to where they got to. Like in
But the
like
pouches were always there.
yeah, the pouches were always there.
Pouches were always there.
But what was really great about what these guys were doing is that shared universe
Mm-hmm.
was that each one of them had their own house to be creative. So we're talking about Jim Lee, Ty McFarlane, Liefeld, Paccio for a little bit, who did Cyberforce, Silvestri, and then what was the last one that I'm missing? Valentino. Um, yeah, and then who did Savage Dragon?
That was
Larson.
Eric Larson. Yeah.
So you have basically your 6, 7 guys that actually started this, but they shared their universe. And I remember there being crossovers with each one of the characters being in each other's books. And Youngblood, I think, was pretty much in all the books where you had Bad Rock kind of crossing over through all the books, which was crazy. And then you had the crossover where different artists were drawing different characters in their book, which was great. So that whole shared universe, which we already had something from like the big two already, that had been doing that for quite some time. But to shake that up and be able to do it with characters that nobody ever heard of was fantastic.
And then really quick to have the big two want to get in on that game. So it really was like 4 or 5 years into Image when Marvel licensed out the Avengers and
Right.
Fantastic Four and to Lee and Liefeld, and then that all culminated with a big crossover with their characters. And then even with DC wanting to get in and doing like a Gen 13 crossover, and Mr. Majestic and all that's like, yeah, it was pretty insane at that point because Image was such a mover and a shaker and really hit so hard that everybody wanted to play in their sandbox.
It did. And so if you're writing down a list of pros and cons of what it was that the big two did, and then what Image came along and did, is they wanted to take the power out of corporate environment and give it back to the creators, which is fantastic, right? So we had this big shared universe, but we see with the big two, because everything is from the top and comes down into the creative, there's sort of like somebody at the flagship saying, yes, no, you can play within the sandbox, but here are your rules. And we can see sort of the longevity in that because of the control that they have. Now, on the flip side of that, I think when you have Image pop up, you had this huge, just a creative blast of just so much stuff coming at you. And they really did have a ton of titles just coming out. I mean, there were some delays in some of the titles and stuff like that, but that's for some other time. But when it came down to being creator owned, having no rules, they can do whatever they want to do, that gave us a whole list of new storylines, new characters. They could go to places that we have not seen before, and so forth. The downside to that is that because there was no one leading the flagship, it was a whole bunch of people doing whatever they wanted to do, then they could do whatever they wanted to do, which means they can get up and leave and take their toys with them, and then these guys wouldn't be able to play with them anymore. Or you can sell them off to another company, and now you can't use them anymore. Or you can sell bits and pieces off, and now you don't have rights to your own characters anymore. You can't even do anything with that. So
or the Ghibli route, you license them off to, or you join another company, another publisher, and then eventually you just become president of that big company.
Well, and then I mean, look at, and we talk about Liefeld as well. I mean, he sold off Youngblood and can't get the rights back, and that douche that has the rights is not even doing anything with them. And there was a whole list of shit that guy did to artists and stuff like that. But I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole.
That's it's just funny because Joe Casey mentions that in here, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing I loved about this was that it's really, even though it's not using those characters, and whether Rob had the rights or not, if he would let him, there's such love for what was done back then that is present in here. And there's a great moment too, because Joe Casey wasn't part of the original creators, but he was there, I believe, writing when these guys started to leave.
Correct.
And the one character, she has that line where she's like, look, I was there when this all fell apart the first time,
right.
and sort of like, I like that little perspective that he put in there.
So the original Infinity and stuff like that. And I mean, without saying stuff like out loud, we all knew. So this is the poster. That's Youngblood 1. So if I put that back up, that's that. Oh, this. That right there, 100%. So it was just funny to see all the references in there. I mean, it was great to see that. My hope is that this really does take off, and there's sort of like the shared universe. And when he was describing it in the back, it was either I don't want it to be meta. I don't want it to be meta. There was one of two outcomes. This could be an alternate universe to what had started originally, or this can just be plugged in to the current universe and then let stuff happen. Mm-hmm. So let Spawn cross over, let Savage Dragon cross over. Maybe there'll be a resurgence of 90s characters like the Pit. Maybe Cyberforce makes an entrance. I think there's a Cyberforce book coming down the line as well, because Silvestri or Top Cow just had a talent search for a new Cyberforce takeoff. So I think we're going to get another Cyberforce book relatively soon. So if we get some of these characters to come in, and whatever maybe even Liefeld owns at this point, like Blood Wolf and stuff like that, dude, I'm fucking down for that shit, because that's when I got in.
There was because there was a couple of references to Dutch, right? With Joe Casey also currently writing a new Dutch series. So I think that's sort of thing. And I like that. Yeah, like there's the two options, and I like how he invites people for the letters page to discuss the pros and cons of each. Like, is this its own thing, or is this a patch on the past? And so to see where that goes, and I really do hope it gets like that nice community of fans sort of being like, well, this is how I think it is, and this is how I think it is, and have a little fun.
Listen, even if it's like siblings that they have grown up now, if we get Shaft's daughter or Badrock's son and something like that, and they're not called their sons and daughters, but this is there, I'm down for that as well. I mean, whatever you got to get down to get around legal, you got to get around.
I get the sense that Ripcord in this new book is a second generation. I don't think he's the original one from the first time.
Correct. Yeah. So, but I mean, we'll see. I liked it. I dug it. And for me, in the 90s, when we look at the way that storytelling was really done, you had one of two. You knew who the bad guy was straight up from the very beginning in a lot of these books, or you had sort of like that reveal that made you go, oh. And most of the time, you knew you were going to get a reveal because the characters that were the good guys were being real assholes. And oftentimes, the real assholes you thought were going to be the bad guys, and they end up being the good guys. And it brought me back so much, because we had Infinity, the old Infinity, who's taking over this new team, being an asshole. She's the asshole that's ripping assholes into everybody else. So I knew there was just going to be some kind of reveal. And then when I turned that last page, I was like, there it is, there it is. So it's yeah. I
But
mean,
funny because I mentioned Ripcord here. So they took Ripclaw, right, and they gave him a new name called Ripcord, which I thought, well, that's funny because GI Joe has a character named Ripcord, and Image currently has the GI Joe license. So I think because of the movie, like no one's using Ripcord anymore because of Marlon Wayans, right? Because the GI Joe live action movies. So I don't think Ripcord is in play in the GI Joe stuff. But I thought that was really funny, where it's like where you're changing a character, the original character's name to sound similar to that name, but you just landed on another property's name.
Well, I don't know if Ripcord is from Ripclaw, because Ripclaw was from Cyberforce.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean,
so
and I
this?
don't know
Who
any
is
of the
this?
characters. No, I don't think any of the characters. These are all made up characters. These weren't characters 30 years ago.
Because
So
who?
they're supposed to fill that void.
Yeah,
so
hold up
issue the Youngblood team.
Yeah. So who hold up issue 1 again? Then I forgot Ripclaw was Cyberforce.
No.
So who's there?
Yeah. You got Shaft, Chapel, Vogue. You have Die Hard, Combat, Bad Rock. No, that's not Combat. Is that Combat? That's not Combat. That's what's his face?
Bad
Combat.
Rock. Oh,
yeah, no, it's Bad Rock was the big
guy.
Yeah.
Who they had.
Because this was so the way that it was set up is that this was the home team,
right?
And then Sentinel was leading the away team.
Gotcha.
You're probably thinking Riptide. Riptide was the female that can draw water from non-watery places. Because this is the one. This first issue is when they kill Hussein. It's in the middle of a desert. And she still creates a fucking flood. It's amazing.
Which is great that this does the thing with the Russian soldiers in the Ukraine. I like in its first issue.
Yes.
So this guy, this Ripcord guy, then he's in the position of Chapel in the poster in the book.
Right.
So I guess he's the Chapel analog for this.
Yeah. So if you're gonna cross it over that way, then the lead guy, which is Tachi, I think in this particular one.
He's Shaft.
The leader, he's Shaft.
Yeah.
And then you got the girl to the right, who's the new Infinity. I think that's the daughter of the other Infinity. She was kind of taken out of the scenario.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, she would be Vogue. And then Bad Rock is the big guy in the back.
Yeah.
And that guy that has the big claw thing, that would be who?
Well, he's in Chapel's position.
Oh, Chapel's position, correct.
Yeah.
The guy that's all to the lower left in the blue, that would be Die Hard.
Yeah.
And then behind him is Combat.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like, I don't know. Liefeld was going through this phase where everybody just had pointy ears and they were like from a different planet. So Blood Wolf, Combat, Cougar, they all look pretty much like they were from the same planet. But listen,
and to my confusion, it was an era when everybody had to have a Wolverine type on the team.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, it was an era of teams, wasn't it? Because you had Youngblood to launch it. The second book that came out was Spawn, which was I think a month after, and that was a solo book. And Savage Dragon was a solo book. Shadowhawk was a solo book. But then you got Cyberforce with Sylvestris. And then who else do we have coming in? Wetworks
down the road. Yep.
So there were a bunch of teams and stuff like that, which is great. Yeah, Wildcats from Jim Lee.
Yep.
So there were at least 3 or 4 team books that started it off. Yeah, there was just so many characters. It was just, I don't know. I miss it. I miss it badly.
And then to have Chapel.
If you can hear this, Joe Casey, if you hear this, we need more of it. We'd love to have you on. What your plans are to create this universe? We'd love to be involved. But if we're a spectator, I want to be along for the ride.
The gauntlet has been thrown down, Joe Casey. You have to come on now.
Yeah. So we'll see. I liked it. It was a good read. It's very nostalgic, and it's funny because it plays on itself while it's telling the story.
Yeah.
And then you get all that back matter that Joe Casey gave you at the very end that you already obviously knew, especially if you were, a child of the 90s in this particular instance. So
I was going to say, I was just trying to say early continuity connection, having Chapel be responsible for Al Simmons dying in, the early Spawn comics. Like what a great thread that they had, like that connected those books. And it was just, it was really cool.
It was really cool. So hopefully we get a little bit of, even if it lasts just for a year or something like that, it'd be cool. I'd love to see it. So we'll see. Maybe we can get some local man in there, some cross-jack to come over. That'd be fucking awesome. And then you get Spawn to just show up out of nowhere. Holy shit. You want to see me jizz? That's how it happened.
What if all the Spawns showed up?
Oh my God, forget it. My knees will go weak. All right, guys. This is Blood Squad 7. If you're sort of like that 90s nostalgic, storytelling and superhero, this is a superhero, a really traditional superhero from the 90s, I should say. Book. Yeah, check it out. There's some great references there to stuff that we definitely read into the 90s. And if you haven't checked out Local Man yet either, another one to
Mm,
definitely check out as well. I think it's on its second volume now, so you can
yeah.
definitely get the trade on the first one. Really, really good stuff from Tim Steele and Tony Fleece there. So,
Although the trade I don't think has the same appeal of the flip book like the single issues do.
you know what? I haven't seen it yet. Have you
I
seen
haven't
it?
checked the. I haven't checked. I haven't looked into the trade. I haven't
Yeah,
Yeah. I remember it came through, but yeah, yeah.
I
Just
gotta
I
check
don't
it out
know.
the same way.
That's something that's so fun. Like you described before, just and like the original Youngblood one and the original. I love a flip. I love a good flip book. It was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I mean, originally it was such a cool concept for Youngblood because you had all these characters, and rather than putting them, 12 characters all together in one particular book, one style, he separated from a home and away team. And it was sort of like this first time that we saw superheroes almost being glamorized in the books
Hmm.
because they became stars. And this is sort of like what Joe Casey was alluding to in regards to what may or shouldn't happen the second go around, because I know there was a resurgence of Young Blood with Chad Bauer, who was drawing it, and Rob Liefeld, drawing it. And this
Hmm.
happened in Image, and I don't know how that happened, because I'm trying to think of.
That was with Image. It wasn't with Extreme, right?
No, 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 no. It was
Yeah.
with Image, but I can't. I'm trying to remember. It had the original cast in there too, like Shaft and Bad Rock and stuff like that. So I don't know because it was in this 2000 era. It couldn't have been more than maybe 6 years ago.
Hmm.
I got to look it up. I got to find out how that happened because I don't know when he lost license
Right.
to
Right.
them or what he was allowed to do or not do in that
Hmm.
particular. So, because if I recall, this wasn't old material that was being reprinted. This was new material that was being done. Or, yeah, I'm going to do research on it and I'll have answers for you next week. If you have answers, you can always let me know as well. Because I want to know. I thought it was coming back because I was really excited, and I ran for like maybe I think it was a 6-issue run, and then that's it.
Okay.
So, all right, we've gone off on a tangent. We're back in the 90s. We're coming back now to the 2024s. So we're all good. All right, so those are your reviews for this week. And that's all that we have for you this week, kiddies. If you like what you're hearing, click subscribe to the podcast. Better yet, tell 100 friend of yours so that we can meet here every Thursday at
Hmm.
1 p.m. If you're a creator, want to promote yourself or your project, go to amazingactioncomics.com/podcast, fill out the form. John and I would love to have you on to speak about your projects.
Yeah, Joe Casey.
Yeah, Joe Casey. Make sure you stay up to date on everything that we got going on at amazingactioncomics.com. As I stated before, the site is sort of like on hold right now. So there's like this coming, stay tuned. We're working on so many things right now, and we're really excited about what we have coming in the fall. So definitely keep checking back for updates on that. Finally, please, please, please support your local comic book shop because without them, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing week in and week out. John, where do you get your comics from?
Well, I get my comics at The Joker's Child in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And you know what? We spent a lot of time talking about the 90s today. Well, guess what? The Joker's Child is going to be having a sale in a couple weeks, and I think the last time the Joker's Child had a sale was sometime in the 90s. So it's a real flashback episode, folks, for us. So yeah, you know what? Come on down to the Joker's Child. Keep that put that sale on your calendar. I think it's the weekend of June 8th. I'll let you know exactly next week.
Whoops,
But
that was
it's all right. It's a premature ending there.
yeah.
But in the meantime, come and check out The Joker's Child every Wednesday, where new comics come out every week on a Wednesday. And you know what? Mentioned her before, Christine Farrell. She coined that phrase. She said, "You know what's great about working in a comic shop? It's like a little bit of Christmas every Wednesday. So go on down to your local comic shop on a Wednesday and celebrate Christmas every week."
Nice. All right, kiddies, that's all that we have for you this week. So until next time, please be amazing, stay amazing, and read something amazing.